Hi everybody, I'm Gary. Yes, Loughborough University, London. It's beautiful, blue sky. This represented what I was given when I was asked to put telephony into this site, because there was very little there to start with. We faced some challenges, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Who am I? Hopefully most of you here have seen me talk before, so I won't spend too much time on this. I've been at Loughborough for 11 years now, used to work in the network and security team, got bumped up to Unified Communications when our telephone manager retired, and we moved over from ISDXs to Cisco VoIP. So that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years now. Our Olympic legacy. I thought my boss was going to be here today, and I thought I was going to have to be diplomatic about this, but he's not, so I get to be a little more honest about it. I was involved in some very different work at Loughborough University before doing the telephony, and I got to go to some very early meetings down in London about what Loughborough University was going to be doing to house sports people on campus, and what was going to be going on down at Olympic Park as part of the Olympics. And something that was made very clear to us when we were invited down to these meetings, the focus was all on the Olympic legacy, and it's probably not the Olympic legacy that was banged on about in the news and the media a lot. It was about how everybody's going to be able to make so much money out of it. All the buildings that they were putting up for the Olympics were being built at the absolute lowest cost possible. They were putting in infrastructure into these buildings that was designed from the ground up to last for 3 months while the Olympics were on. There was no consideration given whatsoever to the extended use of these buildings. The intention was that when companies moved into the buildings after the games were finished, they would be the ones spending all the money fitting them out with decent plumbing, decent electrics, decent networking, in many cases completely ripping out 90% of the fabric of the buildings and making them fit for purpose. And it was all about the trickle down of contracts to people who were going to come in and do this work after the games. I was quite shocked at how little time was spent actually talking about the nice side of things that you saw in the media about how they're going to provide all these sporting facilities to local people, most of which hasn't borne any fruit whatsoever. Anyway, cynicism aside, let's get on. Yes. Back on tune now. In 2012, Olympic Park was the home of the celebrated London Olympic and Paralympic Games, blah, 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 blah. It's all wonderful. Come and live and work in London. The brief I was given. We were opening up a small satellite campus in London for exactly the same reasons that many other universities around the country are doing it. It's to attract international students. London is seen to be the place to be for students who are coming to study in the UK from abroad, and a lot of, provincial is probably the wrong word, but people outside of the M25 struggle to get those international students. So we were opening this campus up down there, and I was asked to provide telephony for approximately 100 users initially. This was purely going to be staff, teaching staff and support. The telephone services had to be integrated with the existing campus services to the extent that essentially users down there wouldn't know they were on a different site. We needed to have London 020 numbers for the Loughborough University London users down there, and also for certain Loughborough users who were remaining on campus. Sorry, I've run out of space in these slides, so I've used LUL, Loughborough University London. We had many rebrandings during this exercise, particularly as somebody discovered that LUL is considered to be a rude word in certain Northern European countries, but unfortunately we're stuck with it, so you'll see that in a lot of these slides. Video calling was considered essential, and conferencing would be a nice to have. So we put down quite a lot of video phones down there. We've got 100 users, approximately 50% of those endpoints are video capable devices. Our Cisco Call Manager infrastructure currently doesn't support full-blown video conferencing. That's coming next year, but we can do point-to-point video calls. We started planning in this in January last year, looking at an August tenancy this year for our very first users. We'll be scaling up over the coming year, adding more users, staff and students down there. And one thing that threw a bit of a spanner in the works was that from the beginning we wouldn't be in our ultimate accommodation. Eventually we're going to be in what was the old broadcast and media centre down on here, East Olympic Park, but that building wasn't ready when we wanted to move in, so we actually had to go into temporary accommodation for 6 months, so that presented some additional challenges to getting stuff put in. So yeah, those parameters of what we would actually have to deal with when we were down there. There was no on-site data centre, so we couldn't have any servers down there. There's no storage down there. Everything's being run across the WAN, and the comms rack space is also very limited. So I didn't have the option of putting in any local call manager servers or voice gateways. Literally all we've got space down there for is routers and switches to get layer 3 in there. As I say, we're in temporary accommodation, so we're also dealing with temporary bandwidth. We haven't got our Janet link in there. We'll eventually be getting some decent bandwidth, but we had to make do with a BT link. This got bounced around 2 or 3 different providers. At one point we were panicking when they were saying that we wouldn't be able to get the link in for 3 months, and we were this close to going down there with a 4G modem to provide the best that we could. That didn't happen, fortunately. So yeah, initially it's 1 gig second link from BT. When we move into the permanent accommodation, we'll be getting a 2 times 10 gig geographically diverse link back to campus, and for all intents and purposes we'll be on the same LAN. So here's our network weather map from campus. As you can see down here, London. It's just hanging off our central core infrastructure, hub and spoke architecture. As far as the network's concerned at the moment, it's just another park on our existing LAN. We're getting 25 millisecond round trip time on pings down there, so that was a big help. So that temporary BT link is 1 gig a second, presented as Ethernet. It was a supposedly transparent Ethernet link. However, that wasn't quite the case, as I'll talk about in a moment. We're getting that 25 milliseconds round trip time. We originally wanted to run a grey tunnel from our 6500 core router down to a 3750X stack in London. Unfortunately, the 3750s and the 6500s have a different idea of how to run a grey tunnel. That didn't work. So next option was we wanted to put ASAs at either end. Fortunately, we had a couple of spares kicking about in a storeroom, and we were going to run MACsec over the link. However, the BT link didn't like that idea either, because when you do MACsec, it puts on an extended ether type header onto the Ethernet frame, and the BT link was a bit more picky about the Ethernet frame types than they told us, and it just completely refused to pass the packets. So in the end, we have no security on that link between campus at all. It's considered a private link, but obviously it's running through the BT public infrastructure. We're encrypting all the protocols individually that go across that, so we're not too bothered about it. And as I say, it's a temporary link. It's 1 gig per second link. We're averaging under 100 meg usage on it. We peaked up to 320 meg for some reason last Thursday. I don't know why, but we're not seeing a great amount of bandwidth usage on that at the moment. We don't have an awful lot of users at the moment. That's going to change. So the London number ranges that we were asked to put in there. We worked with our commercial SIP partner to initially get a block of 100 contiguous DNs. We asked them specifically to make sure that the least significant 6 digits of that number range did not overlap with our existing campus infrastructure, just to make life easier for me, really, for routing patterns. It would be much better if there was no overlap there. We also got some gold numbers off them. I was shocked at how cheap and how quick it was getting numbers and gold numbers out of a SIP partner compared to working with traditional ISDN-based TSPs. That was real pleasant. The turnaround was usually under 24 hours. We got an initial 100 block of SIP numbers put on, and then I was told that we were also going to have to provide telephony for the tenants and partners in the same building. And again, our partner came through very, very quickly with another 100 numbers. The 020 numbers that we were given are 8-digit. We're currently working on a 6-digit numbering range in Loughborough, so this gave me the biggest challenges in integrating this onto the campus. We had to do a lot more work within the call manager to get that working. So the call routing, the inbound Loughborough University London number ranges are presented to us over a SIP trunk from our SIP provider. They're terminated on a pair of Cisco 2961 gateways running Cube. They were already in place and running because we used the same provider for our clearing operation. So they were just sending more numbers to us than they already were. The infrastructure for that part of it was already in place. The Loughborough University London handsets are registered to the call manager over the WAN because it's so robust. There was no need to do anything extra there. They just route straight back over. All we had to do was make sure that the DHCP ranges that we were providing for the London campus had all the right TFTP options and that the phones were put onto the correct voice VLAN on the switches down there. Outbound calls from London come back over the WAN link into the call manager, and they currently get routed out over our existing ISDN links. Get Type 5 CLI from your TSP if you can. It makes life so much easier. Although we only receive Loughborough inbound calls on those ISDNs, we can specify whatever outgoing caller ID we like on those because we've done all the paperwork and the due diligence and they trust us. So we can route out our 020 numbers on those links quite happily. What did we have to do on the call manager to get this working? Well, we set up a device pool on call manager. Sorry, this bit's all going to be very product specific for those of you who aren't running call manager. It makes bulk configuration a lot easier if you can put your devices for a particular locale into one device pool. We also set up a different partition. This makes it a lot easier to do the digit manipulation that we had to do and the routing because they're treated as a separate part of campus. We also set up a new region on the call manager. This was really important while we were on the temporary bandwidth because it enables us to specify relationships to other regions on the call manager and restrict the amount of bandwidth and the codecs that are used. As I said earlier, video calling was considered to be very important for this, but while we were on a 1 gig link down to London, we thought we'd better restrict that. So here, here and here, you can see that we're restricting the video calls to the rest of campus and VPN users to 384k a second, whereas if they're making a video call to other endpoints on the London region, then they can go all out and use 4 meg of bandwidth. Once we move up to the Janet connection in the permanent location, we'll be doing away with the 384k restriction and we'll let them go all out and use 4 meg because we're convinced that it'll be absolutely fine. Next, more call manager configuration. We had to put in the correct translation patterns to force on net calls from Loughborough to London. This means that if somebody dialed 020 and 8 digits, we had to configure the call manager to strip off the STD code and route it internally. Likewise, if somebody did +4420 and then the 8 digits, we'd do the same. This is because we're using Jabber soft phones extensively on campus, and they use full E164 dialing from within the directory, so we have to strip off those digits and make sure that they get routed properly. We also had to put in the application dial rules to support the new number ranges. This means that operators see the right numbers and that the Jabber clients can route it properly. And we had to do the correct directory lookups as well. I did a little document internally for all the steps that we need to do when we're adding additional number ranges. It came in quite useful later on as well for other projects. The other thing was that the MGCP trunks from the gateways into call manager were originally configured to only pass 6 significant digits. This was because we had 6-digit number range at Loughborough. Now, it was very difficult to change those MGCP trunks. In fact, we couldn't. Once you connect a gateway into the call manager, it seems there is one link and there is only one amount of digits that you can pass. Fortunately, I'd already specified to our provider that the number ranges couldn't overlap with the existing Loughborough ones, so I was able to do a digit manipulation rule on the inbound trunk that would recognise any calls that were coming in for London users and prepend the two most significant digits back on. It's a bit complicated, but it did actually work out just fine. And lastly, we had to do the relevant dial peer voice and voice translation profiles on the gateways to accept the new number ranges. In conclusion, don't buy into the Cisco design reference guides. I already knew this because I've been working with Cisco kit for years. If we did everything the way Cisco wanted, we'd have 6500s in every networking closet around the campus, because that supposedly is their edge switch architecture. Exactly the same applies to the unified comms. When I started looking at this project, I thought, oh no, I'm going to have Call Manager Express down there and survivable remote site telephony and all this, that and the other. But when we started looking at the quality of the WAN link that we were going to get down there, the latency, the bandwidth that was available, I stopped panicking and thought, no, this is just going to be like another leg of our network. We'll just be able to put handsets down there. Temporary space with temporary network is temporary. Yes, I know this network isn't resilient at the moment, but we're only in there for 6 months. When we move into the permanent site, we're going to have dual redundant links back. We took a slightly laissez-faire attitude with this, and we said, look, if the network link goes down, yes, we're going to lose telephony, but we're also going to lose file store, we're going to lose email, we're going to lose web browsing, we're going to lose everything. Losing telephony isn't the end of the world, because actually most people down there have got a mobile phone with them as well. So it's the one thing really that users are providing their own resilience for. All the other services that we're providing into this temporary space, we can't actually provide resilience for. So the telephony was actually the least of our worries. Yeah, the resilience will be built in with a Janet connection when we get it put in. So again, I'm not too worried about not having a call manager down there, about not having resilient voice links. So we've got no intention of increasing the call manager provision down there on site when we move to the permanent location. Although we are looking at moving our outbound to SIP calling for our SIP endpoints in the next year, and ultimately we're going to experiment with moving over some of our currently ISDN provided numbers onto SIP outbound as well. It's just one in a big list of other projects that we're looking at the moment, so that's going to come in time. That's me done. Thank you for listening. Sorry if that was a bit fast. Have I finished early?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll take some questions then in that case, if anybody has any. Yeah.
You observed that video telephony was seen as more or less mandatory.
Yeah.
Do you have a view as to how much it's actually being used and how many of those 50% of video devices are actually being used in video calls most of the time?
Unfortunately, I don't have a view, because I've been trying to figure out if our Tiger call logger can differentiate between video calls and voice calls, and it doesn't seem it can. And I can't get any information out of the call manager directly either. It's something that I would love to know. Around that, I can say that since we opened up the London campus, we've had quite a few requests from departments on the main Loughborough campus to have video endpoints put in so that they can call the London users. Also, I think it's worthwhile noting that nobody from London so far has come back and asked us how do we disable video calling by default, which was one of the things that we had from many of our Jabber users when we first started putting that out. So I think there's a bit of a mindset difference there, in that they're quite happy to be using video calling and they want to be using it. One of the problems that we've had is that the video capable endpoints, even the little 8945 handsets, are twice the cost of a standard desk phone. As with most big shiny projects, there was money thrown at putting the endpoints into London, so it wasn't seen as being an issue to put those video phones on the desktops. However, when people around the main campus are then coming to me and saying, how do we get video phones like London? I says, well, give me a budget code and we'll see what we can do.
How much?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks then.